I have one item that I'd like to start off with, brief but important, that everybody hopefully would pay attention and carry this to the community. Any of you that are aware of the hearings that have been going on with regards to the expansion of the industrial park? And there was a second of two hearings was held Tuesday night at the community center. It was fairly well attended. It was rather startling, if you would, some of the comments and or thought processes that were presented against allowing the industrial park to proceed as planned, if you would. You know, hard to read the tea leaves and people's motivations or whatever, but you know, there is nothing that has happened in the town of Littleton that has done more to improve our tax base situation than what the industrial park has done over the last 40 years. And there were people there who were questioning their intentions, their motives, you know, like there was something going on behind the scenes that somebody was making some money on this, where the fact is, you know, that starting with Paul McGoldrick and King Covey and coming all the way up through Chad Stearns and Greg Eastman, I mean, you've had nothing but 40 years of donated time, you know, basically just like everybody sitting at this table. None of you guys are getting rich off the stipend that you're paid to be on the school board, right? It works out to what, 22 cents an hour at the most? You know,
about 110.
110, okay. So, you know,
Steve, I'm sorry. If you're gonna do this,
yes.
somebody's gonna have equal time.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
gonna say against it. So I'm not so sure this
Okay.
is the right place for this kind of.
Well, anyway, the reason it is, Ralph, is because I made the decision and we're here together, okay? But the point is that people obviously need to understand the economics of this situation. And, you know, just to put out there about that somehow some building is gonna be unsightly or that somehow we're gonna be impacting wetlands, which, you know, that's a whole wetlands area, and every building that they've done there over the years has involved wetlands mitigation. So, I mean, it's all been done correctly. I mean, everything is, you know, I mean, virtually any town or city in the state of New Hampshire would give their eye teeth to have that type of organization. You know, coming from Berlin, New Hampshire, where most of this stuff has been done wrong for the last 40 years, and you can see obviously the situation that Berlin finds themselves in. It really brings home to me because, you know, when I see this and the positive nature of it. So anyway, I would encourage anybody and everybody to get informed and get involved as best possible because, you know, while some of the arguments, if you would, that some people are making might in some ways sound good, when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, none of it makes any sense. So, and if we were to lose this part of our community, it would really, you know, I mean, the challenge that we have annually on coming to some type of regional budget would become even greater.
What I think Steve was kind of alluding to, Ann and I, before the meeting, were saying, can we have this document, can we have this document? We received a document from the town manager at the last meeting that we had, budget meeting that we had with them. And it just showed how the valuation for the tax base, what impacted it this year. And we have 4 areas that are come together to give us our tax base, and that is land use, residential, then it was commercial and industrial together, and utilities. And so in this document that the town manager presented us, it showed that residential and land use basically were flatlined. They did not increase at all last year. And the utilities went down by $8 million. But the commercial and the industrial went up by $4 million. So it shows, or showed me anyways, the importance of all of these different components. Because one will be up one year, one will be down next year, but we need to always continue to work at each of those. And so that was about the industrial park expansion. The other thing too is we have the other comment I would like to make about the importance of supporting and getting involved, not just blindly supporting it, but getting involved in this discussion, is that we cannot continually depend on the dam to keep our tax base afloat. And as you, I think we sent out the email with the op-ed by Brad Bailey about the potential impact of House Bill 324, I believe it is, and also how that can impact us. So all of these things together bring us to our budget and help us hopefully be able to invest in our schools and in our roads and all components of our town. So as Steve was saying, become involved, become aware, and join the discussion.
Steve? No. Do you want to discuss the new voucher bill that's on the table while we're at it?
The new what?
The school voucher bill.
Vouchers.
Oh, yeah. See, you're lying. That
Yeah,
was-
right, think about impacts.
Yeah, there's several things happening with that. One which would involve current homeschool students. The superintendents met with a group of legislators last week. And again, the talk there, and this is primarily from Rick Ladd, who's chair of the House Education Committee, that the voucher bill would serve, one of the voucher bills would serve homeschool students. They would need to return to the public school for a year and meet certain other criteria. And at that point, if their parents wanted to remove them from public school and do something different educationally, they could. Then they receive the state portion of the funding. That's one aspect to vouchers. Other aspects to vouchers, and I think that does have some checks and balances in it. I think it's problematic for some other reasons, but that's okay. I think there is a fear that the money wouldn't necessarily reach the kids, and particularly in some instances where families are homeschooling and not educating their kids. I think the other piece of this, it's my wife.
It's a reminder to us all, anyway.
The other piece of this is, though, that the many homeschool situations are fine, and that's not. This isn't about public educators bashing parents or other organizations that do a good job with homeschool education. The problem is that there's very little accountability there. They used to be that they need to let us know who they were, where they were, and report to the superintendent. That's not the case anymore. So a lot of those safeguards are removed. So I think it's most important there to think about what's best for the kids of homeschool families and support those that are in fact getting a good education. But if that's not the case, writing out a voucher at the expense of the public school of $4,000 to $5,000 is foolish. Secondly, I've yet to see a voucher system that does what proponents claim they will do, which is to benefit low-income families. And they typically are most used. I mean, you give a low-income family of $5,000. In some cases, that might in fact get them into a different setting, a different educational setting, a private setting, but not likely. You're probably looking at twice that, 3 times that, or more. Some of those settings do have alternatives and finance plans and so on, so I don't want to, but I think that's the other piece of it. I think that the homeschool piece, or the voucher piece, again, if recipients of federal or state vouchers have to follow the same rules that public schools do, and that's another piece of that typically gets lost in the shuffle. So, I hope at the end of the day people take a deep breath. This is not about public schools versus homeschools. This is not about parents versus parents. It's about policy and taxation policy and so on.
Is there a bill number to that, or is it in bill form, or?
Something passed,
193.
didn't it? Or-
Was it passed?
SB
Do
193.
we give vouchers to
Senate Bill
homeschool kids?
190.
Do they get cash?
We would if this bill passes in the future.
Oh, they don't?
Not now. No, not now.
And Steve, obviously, talking about Littleton, Lisbon, and profile, if you would.
Yeah.
I mean, structurally or functionally, we're very much like private schools anyway. Not to overstate the word, but I mean, obviously, the size of our classrooms and
Yeah.
the relationships or whatever, I mean, you know, at least our kids in this area obviously get some very good
Yeah.
one-on-one, hands-on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know their schools, but we know where they are. They're typically in inner cities and places that are not the most desirable. And I get that. And that's usually where the argument's made, get these poor kids out of these horrible inner city schools. You know, that's intellectually dishonest. That's not what happened.
So we both have things to look at on both sides.
Yeah.
Right, so let's get on with the.
What we
rest of the
can
story.
address. Okay. But thank you very much, and I just appreciate the time, just to, you know, it's a big issue, and it's something we don't wanna just kinda let, nor this one here, I mean, obviously, we need to be aware, and obviously, on your side, or Steve, if our local representatives or whatever are up to speed on this, Steve, and have been
Very much.
educated.
Yeah, Linda
on-
was there at that meeting. I've spoken to Aaron about it a little bit, Brad.
Because obviously, they need to have your perspective, your understanding of it.
And they do contact me fairly frequently, by the way.
Good things come from Kansas.
Especially basketball, not football.
Give Kentucky.
Well, are we having a little problem staying on task tonight?
No, that was a very good start.
Says you.
Well, it says me, that's right.
Ready?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Okay, we'll go low tech since high tech's not gonna work. You had the handout though, that's why we have the low tech option. I just added a few things, some clarifications. There was a request last week, we share some student performance data with you, which I will do. With my colleagues in the back who can certainly fill in some of the blanks that I undoubtedly will create in my presentation. Tax rates, I think I just wanted to give a little bit of a history. Most of you know this already. Took this off the state side. And again, there's nobody in this room is shocked by seeing what the valuation has done over the past few years. I should go back pre-2007, 6, 7, 8, I see what that valuation is. But I think we know what it's done over the past few years, and it's not performed terribly well. And then just the mix of taxes, where each of those has gone in the last few years. So a little bit of history there. By the way, are we recording for Channel 2?
Red light's on.
Okay, oh, it is. Good. Okay, just making sure. Next slide shows the tax rates from a few selected towns. You know, and again, I didn't include some of these on here because they have high tax rates. They're in the North Country. They're contemporary districts, but I also tried to include those that are close by. And I think again, you see some interesting phenomena there. Bethlehem's is really high, but it hasn't changed a whole lot. It's been high for a while. Unfortunately for Tom, Colebrook is the biggest tax change in the last few years.
50% almost.
Approaching $8. Littleton's not much better. We're 5.5 almost. Berlin, you know all about all of these.
I just want to interject one thing.
Yep.
There are 32 towns in the North Country, north of the Notch.
Yep.
Littleton right now has the 8th highest tax rate in the North Country.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that, Ralph. You gotta remember, many of those towns are a very small population, a fairly small population of students. They're tuitioning those students out to, as you know, to schools nearby, but yeah. I try to look at towns that for the most part at least had in the neighborhood that had a school facility in the town as well, but you're right. And those taxes tend to be much lower. But they're also dealing with, in most cases, fairly small numbers of students. Staffing comparison 6 to 17. This is a slide I shared with you last week. A few updates. I think I intended to have what's at the bottom of the page there last week, which showed what do each of those categories include, what do we mean by teachers, instructional support, and so on. These numbers for 17, 18 are different from what I gave you last week, because those numbers were taken from the prior year, so those were incorrect. 17, 18 numbers are correct. So, actually, if you look purely at classroom teachers, our ratio's slightly higher. It's basically the same as it was 10, 12 years, 11 years ago. We've added some support staff. Typically, I mean, those are paraprofessionals. And again, Kelly could talk in more detail.
Pardon me, Steve.
Sure.
What is a paraprofessional for education? That's
The vast majority of paraprofessionals are special ed, support students with disabilities, special ed, students who are in a special ed program. Those individuals may provide anywhere from a few minutes or an hour a day in the classroom. They may provide many hours a day to an individual student. Some students require a paraprofessional with them all day long.
What's most of their education background?
They have, many of them have, some of them are certified teachers. I mean, it's not unusual for a paraprofessional, by the way, to have a teaching background. Some of ours fall in that category. Most of them have some college. There is a certification process that they go through that gets them to the level that we hire paraprofessionals at. They're highly skilled people in many areas. They deal with some of the most difficult situations. Millie could tell you more about it than anyone in the room, probably besides Kelly and the principals. But
Paras, first of all, they were never really called paraprofessionals when I did it many, many years ago. But you work real closely with that classroom teacher. You
Yep.
take direction from the teacher. They're the professionals.
yeah, they're critical. You know, I think frankly we're getting, you know, and there's no way to we haven't quantified this. We haven't chosen to quantify this. At some point we may need to quantify this, because if you look at this report, you'll see that we have about the same number of kids at special education enrollment now as we did 10 years ago, 130 versus 135. And maybe this is just human nature, but I don't think so. I mean, I'm in the buildings a lot. We're seeing more and more challenging cases, more and more kids that need one-on-one. With a group of superintendents, actually the last year, we were talking about the struggles we have and feeling like we really are struggling to meet the needs of some of our kids and families. And I know one of the superintendents said, you know, it used to be our most challenging students, so you could hire a paraprofessional to work with that student all day long and things would be okay. That's not necessarily the case anymore. More and more students have needs to go way beyond that, and so that's it's a critical position. Librarians, you see the rest of the categories there. Administration, positions of some of the positions that were listed in administration, I think a few years ago, or weren't, are now. So that number is basically unchanged, although if you look at least what I would consider administration versus a year ago, we did make some reductions there. And so on, all other support. So there has been a reduction in overall staff, not proportional to the fallen students, so because otherwise that ratio wouldn't be less than it was 6-7. That ratio is 5.4 students per staff, overall staff member then is 4.7 now. So no, the adjustments have not been proportional. Part of that has to do, as said, with I think greater needs of students. Part of it has to do with you have to have at least until you reach certain levels, you have to have a building principal, whether you have 200 kids or 300 kids. You may not need as many, or you may have a different structure, but some of that doesn't change just because of the heating bill and so on doesn't go down with fewer kids and so on. And that's another part of the budget.
Maybe this is a dumb question. Why are the needs for kids so much greater now than they were 20 years ago?
The drug epidemic, to be very honest with you, rising poverty among many students, families. I think the general decline in, I mean, this is, and other people have different views on this, but this has been going on for a while. We've been saying for a while that the jobs that people used to get right out of high school don't exist anymore. People who go right out of high school, go into certain areas and get good paying jobs with good benefits and good pensions, those don't exist anymore. And so you're seeing more and more and more people, even some with some college, that are getting jobs that frankly don't support the health care they need, and so on and so on.
It's required.
That's part of a bigger question, but, yeah,
Well, the rules and regulations have changed.
Right, it's required.
very much, that too.
Pushed away.
Yeah. Steve, the only thing that I see missing here on,
Excuse us, please.
what I see missing
Yes.
here, and it's not, it isn't included in the building staffing, so I understand the
Uh-huh.
title of this section. But we also have SAU, and I'm sure
Right.
that the rest of the committee here would like to know the staffing at the SAU.
Sure.
Because it's part of this.
But this is part of the
budget.
state, this is why I put building staffing, I want to make clear that, because this is part of the state, there's a separate building staffing report. The state, SAU staffing report, the state separates them for obvious reasons, because in many cases, because of the nature of the SAU configurations, it's hard to, right? So in our case, we have 5, me, this gentleman, that lady, and the 2 people, and Debbie Hampson and Denny Baird.
So how many is that? 7?
So those are the number of people physically in our office.
Seven?
Seven, I think. Was it seven?
We show 7 on this report too.
Okay, all right.
It depends on how you classify certain individuals. Is our director of operations is doing what 2 people used to do. Now we have 1, but he's technically probably a district employee, an SAU employee. So yes, we've made a good move budgetarily in use of resources, but it looks like we've added administration probably, so that you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
That's a good question.
And I believe in 2006, we were still part of 35.
What was that, Tom?
July 1, 2007.
I can't remember, that was traumatizing.
I think with,
That would
Very
skew those.
dramatic, yeah, it was, wasn't it?
More than one way.
I just think with this and with other things we do, I'm glad you asked questions, the more transparent we can be. I know that's a cliche, transparency, but, I mean, people need to know, they deserve to know, they're paying the bills, so good question. Okay, assessment data, speaking of transparency, to go over here. I'll give you a bit of a overview of this. Like I said, the people who know more than I do can answer questions that you might have. NWEA, this is a computerized assessment. It's been around for a while. It's originated out of the Northwest Educational Center, there by the NWEA agency. NWEA acronym. This was an assessment that was one of the first all computerized tests to come along. Most of us in this room, if we had the pleasure of taking standardized tests, did this, right? Iowa test, probably not Iowa test of basic skills here, but that was a big one where I grew up. Chicago test of basic skill. There's lots of, we all know that. You're shaking your head. NEWA, or MAP, as I've learned to call it, the measures of academic progress, came along and changed a lot of that. It was on the computer. Here's what's really good about it. It adjusts to how well you're doing. So it was always, so the more you answer correctly, the harder the questions get. It'll find out your level that way. And if you start missing questions, it'll make them easier again. You start getting, and it'll figure out kind of where you are. It's a very nice test versus the traditional bubble tests, which simply have really easy questions, really hard questions, all mixed up, and so you never know. So,
And that's, is what grade levels?
this can be done anywhere from kindergarten all the way through 10th grade, 11th grade. NEWA recommends 10th grade is kind of the end, the top piece of it, but I used to give it to 11th grade. I've been working with this assessment for, I don't know, 15 years or more, probably. 3 different schools, now my 4th school using this test. I like it. It gives our teachers usable data, unlike an assessment we'll see on the next page, and so on. So it's a pretty good assessment. Percentage over the right, those that are the percentages of in this case this is math, the students by grade level scoring average or above. To see some fairly strong returns there. We'd like to see those higher. We'd love to see them all as high as grade 3. But with the exception of first grade and I guess 4th grade, and 4th grade is basically right at the average level. Next page we get into the SBAC data. Oh, excuse me, warning you off because of reading. And again, fairly strong results there on the NWA. The SBAC, the Smarter Balanced assessment, which now has been discontinued by the state, so they'll be rolling out a new assessment come this next go around. Results, frankly, aren't as strong as they were with the map. You'll see some classes that you'll see their percentage of students at various levels. Level 4 is the high level, by the way. Level 1 is the low level. That's usually the way you read it, but clarify that. So you want as many as possible at 4. You want as few as possible at 1. So, our results. If you look at that math, those 2 years. In many cases, we're not quite where the state average is in terms of the higher level score. We'll talk more about the assessments in general. The next page, if you look at this is a kind of an interesting piece of data. I'm not sure how they did this. They had to have some high-level math to do this. I can tell you that because you're averaging averages and doing all mixing different types of tests and so on, because you're really mixing the Smarter Balanced tests, the state assessments, with the SAT, which is the grade 11 state assessment. But you can see those results.
See, what are those? Let's look at grade 11. So what is
Yep.
what is the 45, the 40, the 53, and the 55? What do they mean?
Okay, the N is simply the number. That's just how many kids took the assessment.
Yeah.
The percent is what percentage of the students were proficient.
Okay. And on the SAT scale, what would be proficient?
That is in terms of a typical SAT score.
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest with you. They don't base it on that. They do another. That's why I said there's a mathematical process they use here that, frankly.
Did the SAT go back to 2 segments based on 800? Is that right?
It is, but it's with the third, with an optional writing. So there's actually 3.
Okay.
So,
Our kids do take the writing assessment too. Yeah.
so I've always had this in the back of my mind.
Yep.
With our block scheduling, I think with the new arrangement, we're going to see an increase in the scores here. I always go back, and this is just something that I've always, I can't base it on anything any hard facts. But the last year that we had just a 7-period school day, those kids ranked the highest on the SAT scores. And then we went to the 4x4 block scheduling, and there was a decrease. And so I'm assuming that with the alternate days, we're going to see the kids be able to continue with their math throughout the year. They're not going to have a down period, where with the 4x4 they did. So I think we're gonna see some, okay, am I getting some agreement over here?
Yeah.
This
Yes.
was like, I think Crystal's grade was the last grade. in
We were pretty
A-
smart, so.
April, I know, we were. In April, because she, I think, was a year younger in school. Those were the last grade levels that really performed well on the SATs, and then after that, it just, because, and I don't believe it's just because Crystal and April were so brilliant, but maybe that was part of it. But I think it was the scheduling of the classes.
The other thing to think about with SATs is that during that time period, not everybody took them. So
Right.
now you're looking at 100% of our
That's true,
population
too.
taking the SATs. So the kids that were going off towards four-year schools were taking the SATs, others were not.
Yeah.
So that data is skewed anyway.
It is
and
skewed, but
it's-
I also think that the block schedule.
I think you're right with the gap time,
Yeah.
and the schedule, I think, is addressing that.
You know, and I think, and this is gonna come out as we continue, as we go into February, into hearing and deliberating, when we have the public meeting, the other public meetings, but, this is why we're doing some of the things we're doing. This is why we're working with the competency-based grading system, because traditional grading system, you know, you take an average of everything you do, and, you know, if you do well enough in over here, you can do not so well over here, but you just kind of average it out and it looks like you're okay. And I think we all see the fallacy in that versus competency-based grading, which requires that you show proficiency in everything. You can't cherry pick, in other words. You can't, you know, student, and we can't cherry pick what to teach either. It works both ways. We have to make sure the students are competent in all areas. That's going to help. I think the more, and our teachers are, again, I think are working really hard, and they're making lots of changes. We're asking a lot of them right now with a lot of changes, but we'll get there. And I would expect that these scores will improve, whether it's MAP or SAT or whatever. Thank you for that. The 4x4 block is a good system for certain objectives, but it doesn't fit what we're trying to do here.
When you get these back, any and all of them, and obviously the teachers, I mean, the administration evaluates them, and sometimes, then eventually it gets to the principals and the teachers or whatever, and
Right.
what's the reaction? I mean, sometimes, there must be some teachers that are disappointed
Some
that.
take it very personally.
Yeah.
But I think what we're finding is we've had such recent shifts of the test assessment. In the past, we've had a long time with a certain assessment. You're able to figure out that test and in some cases better prepare them for the assessment. And now, after, I don't know, how SBAC's been 2 years, now we're switching to another assessment. So it's a moving target when you look at, looking at how and what they're assessing when it comes to.
That's why we continue to do the NEWA, because that's regular data that we can use immediately. It's immediate feedback. With SBAC, it's months before you get the data, and by the time it's in the hands of the teachers, they have a whole new grade level. So it's not as user-friendly data as the NEWA. The NEWA, they can get the results as soon as the students are done. They can see where their deficiencies were, where their strengths were, and
Yeah,
and
literally,
instruct to those.
with that moment, when they end the test, there's a score.
Although with our new state assessment that'll be administered this spring, the scores are supposed to be instant as well.
Good. That's a positive movement.
It was contrary to some people's opinion. All teachers are not looking to fail all students. I mean,
No.
you know, but some you might feel like that. But I mean, obviously they want to know that what they did got across, and I'm sure I disappointed a few of them over the years. But obviously they want to do a good job, and they want that job to
The
produce a
teachers take
result.
that very personally. Yes, they do. They want their kids to do well.
But certainly, the sooner you get that feedback, that's very, very, very important.
So part of the reason for asking for this was to see how it connected to your budget. So
Or,
if you need certain areas.
you know,
All right.
and I think, yeah, if you look at our staff development priorities and budget reflects some of this, I think, as well. And then there's other data I know that we're going to be introducing going forward. I think we have some excellent data coming out of, for instance, CTC, in terms of job placements and the skills that students are acquiring through that is really, really powerful. And I think in a bigger sense, some of the data generating there in terms of what that our facility in conjunction with our Region 3 partners is producing, I think is really, really impressive in our areas of medical, allied health, and auto tech, and computer, and so on, business and technology. We're doing some, I think, some really nice things with that. So that'll be going forward some of our other work with presenting our program. Okay, there's I think you have handouts that have some budgetary information that Tom has prepared.
I don't know who did the staple.
This is
Hey. Really? I did the best I could.
This still is a draft, obviously. It's labeled that way. We're still fairly early in the process. The details with all the account numbers and such are through 48 pages, I believe, now. I'll be sharing that with the board at their next meeting. So we'll see. I didn't think you wanted that tonight.
and that's not the smallest one, by the way. All right, there's several steps above that one, yeah.
Primarily, if you look at page 8, you get right to the crux. On the last page, we're showing that the general fund only, fiscal 17-18, versus what we're proposing for 18-19, is a $45 difference. The requirement we were given was to come in level funded. I thought if I plugged at $45, you'd probably not believe it. So that's why I let it sit there.
Level.
Where did you get the instructions to come in level funded?
From the board.
From your board?
And this is level funded after, I think we asked at the last meeting what your insurance rates, and so you
They're
know,
in there.
I know they are, but I mean, just as a review to us, you had some challenges, and one of them being,
The health trust rate is 9.5%, that's what we have for support staff.
and that increased it by how much if we were to just,
160,000, our budget, this budget reflects about $160,000 in increased insurance costs.
okay.
159 change to be exact.
At one, a while back, Steve, you had given us rough figures of 200, 200, and 203
Yeah.
segments, if you would. So one of the 200s came down at 160.
You know, that was last year. Last year we were talking, our health insurance increase were even worse. We also had a few more teachers then, you know, and again, part of this is driven by utilization, by who picked what plan. Some of that's a little hard to predict. All Tom can do is take what we have and assume it's going to be the same next year. So, that's what, and this is, you know, this budget's a starting place. The board, I know, has a lot of discussions, deliberations, and things that they're going to be talking about going forward. And as I said before, part of my understanding of the budget hearing is to seek further input from the broader community about the budget priorities and budget plans of the school too. So, as you all know, it's a process that takes
So,
time.
so
Yeah.
asking about those three segments, then, so the insurance accounts for about 160.
Insurance was a big chunk last year. The state required us to, you know, contribute an additional 2% to the retirement fund, and that was over $200,000. So yeah, that's the other 200,000.
So the retirement
And
is
the
about
other-
200?
Yeah, pardon.
Retirement is about 200?
No, because it was
No,
in-
this
it
is
in-
that was last year though, not this year.
It's the same rate for both years.
So,
So the change is because of personnel.
Yeah. So there's no additional expense for the retirement this year's, the budget we're proposing for tonight.
has the
And
same,
we're talking about tonight for next
It's
year.
about $12,600 difference.
Yeah, okay, so it's virtually, okay, so that's the same as the current year. And
So-
in the wage package?
It's in negotiations.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We're negotiating with both teachers and support staff this year.
Yeah.
So they're frozen as far as the operating budget is concerned.
So, if we were to kind of put it together, the insurance went up, so that's in here, because
Yeah.
that is not negotiated unless you negotiate something additional for
Right.
insurance, a change. But the salaries aren't in there. So, so we're not, we're level funded, but we're kind of not level funded, because we don't have any salary increases, which previous
Those cost
budgets
items,
would have been in here.
those cost items would be on the warrant.
Right, well, I know, but I
Assuming
mean, I'm
we
just
have
saying,
agreement,
Yeah.
it's not really level
The
funded.
best we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can level fund
But
the
it's
job.
important to be clear about that, we have that. Yeah, it's like, depending on what happens with negotiations, what happens with the warrants, it could change, obviously.
So, are you I don't know, are you presenting this or just taking questions, or?
I think, yeah, you all can read, I don't want it, but I do, I think that if some of you, any reaction you have to this initially, certainly request for more information. Tom has a lot more details. The board certainly has talked a lot about different things. We're not done. You know, of course, that's part of the whole process. We felt like, we felt
What were some of the one-time expenses that were in this current year's budget that we passed last March that may not be in this? I mean, so there's always a bit of shifting, new projects, because,
Typically, you're looking at capital reserve fund monies, so they wouldn't be in the operating budget.
We had,
pardon?
we had expenses, but we did not have capital.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there weren't, in terms of warrants, there wasn't anything other than those two funds. There weren't any great big items that were financed through warrants per se. There's a lot of ongoing air conditioners
Or the maintenance and
and
stuff.
those kinds of things. I think in this proposed budget for next year, there's again some ongoing maintenance, buildings.
What, can you kind of go over those?
I think, I think the highlight, we have ongoing, a few things. Every year, we're replacing some of the unit ventilators at Lakeway. Those are just an ongoing expense. Last year, we replaced 4. I think there's our budget for 2 of those for next year, at about $10,000 a pop. Some of these things I will submit to the state, because there is a program where there is some cost sharing on some items, of safety related items. So we have some of that. We have, I think there's some things in this building, we actually devoted a lot of resources last year to cameras, safety related items, which I wish this state fund had been around then. That's what it's for this year. So we can't go back and redo that. Well, and I see Dale's here too, so he can speak to some of the other things in terms of facilities that at least are contained in this initial budget. I think some upgrades to the gym, so that there's some issues there. Safety related issues, frankly, with the sprinkler system, the lighting and some of that, and then the tiles themselves. I think there's some desire to, and that's part of the conversation, some desire to look at that. But that hasn't been fully, that may be in the stated budget, it may go out, then maybe something the board will decide we don't go forward with, but in the initial budget, it was in the initial budget. And then there's some other just the general wear and tear that we have to address every year.
So,
Yeah.
recently we've seen a school go through a lockdown and
Yep.
all of that, and I think we can appreciate how people have to enter this school and the safety measures
Yep.
there, but do we have this basically the same process at the elementary school? Do we have that?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything's, can be locked down.
And a double set of doors,
Double set, okay.
and with a CCC as well.
And how about
No, the academy does have the locked doors, but it doesn't have the double entry doors like we do in the other three facilities. But you know, some fair amount of resources have been put in there, sprinklers and some other things too, to make sure that it's up to code. We have a little bit of house cleaning to do there, rearranging a few things that we're keeping there. But obviously, as long as we have kids in there, people in there, we're going to take care of that as well.
Obviously, and they deserve as much protection as
Yep,
everybody
they do.
else. Yeah.
And of course, there's the town, the rec uses that building a lot this summer, during the year, so we need for that as well, for their safety.
When the rec uses that, and this might be something that we have to ask our town manager, when the rec uses that, do they know the same safety procedures for lockdown? I mean, to me, that's
That's a
important.
good question.
It is a good question.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know their procedures for that, to be honest with you, but that's a great
I think that it would
question.
behoove everyone for
Yep.
that discussion to take place.
Yep, I agree.
So Steve, this is the, well, right now, proposed or at least functional gross budget.
The draft, yeah, it's a first draft.
Okay. Now, the income side of it, or?
Tom, do we have?
Yeah, we're not completely finished with that. Yesterday, we got information that adequacy aid is down about $142,000.
142?
Yeah, let me tell you a big
Trying
chunk
to
of
make some
that.
of that up, obviously.
Let me tell you where, I mean, 60,000 of that is stabilization grant, and that's a chunk of money, $1.4 million over a span of 25 years that's being eliminated. And every year, it's bringing in $60,000 less just because of that alone. And the stabilization grant originally was there to offset, to try to address some of the issues related to wealth per pupil and disparities therein. And it arose out of some court cases in Claremont and as with New Hampshire, as with most states in the country, have had numerous court cases related to equity and adequacy funding of education. So, yeah, every year we start off 60,000 behind the year before, then other factors come in as well. If we get lucky and enough keynotes, tickets are bought, that could go up a little bit with some. Actually, if we have 60 kindergartners, that about offsets the loss of stabilization. So, anyway, but it's a beginning point. We only have the numbers we have. So
I think there's a legislative committee that's relooking at adequacy aid this year. So that's all.
I'm sorry,
I can't hear you.
There's a legislative committee that is now again looking at adequacy aid for education. And I can't remember when they're supposed to report, but it's on the website.
I remember sitting down and we had a local state legislator who accused the school board of mismanaging funding and mismanaging the budget. And I couldn't believe it. I was on the school board at that time, and I was like, I really took it to heart. And because there isn't, I know there's a learning curve, and no one would intentionally do any of that. But I sat down and I read the formula, trying to understand the formula.
Is that when you took up drinking?
I did. I did, and I came to within, I mean, it was like millions of dollars, and I came to like $42,000 difference. And I couldn't figure out where it went. but it was because of a decrease in student population.
Yep.
But it's very interesting to be aware of what's in that formula, because everyone in the state is out for their school system. So what is rural, in a rural school system, and what's in the city school systems, they have the population down there, they're closer. So we really need to understand that formula. So I would ask the school board to understand that formula and speak up for rural communities.
I
Even
don't
though-
spend too much time on it because it's changed at least twice since then.
I know, but you have to
But
be
the
stick
thing
with it.
is that, let's say, for example, you have 800 students population in your school system. It's the average daily membership. So if all those 800 kids don't go to school and 650 do, that's where that aid is back on.
And that's why I always say we should serve pizza first and donuts and everything else on that day that they
It
come in.
won't get
Because
the
there's
nutritional
one
balance
day
now.
out of the year that they, that they take that student population who's attending school that day. And that's the number that we have.
But, and Tom, it probably convoluted is probably the word for the, the system that produces the final number, but somebody's always trying to tweak it, I imagine, either for advantage or for correction,
Well, the Department of Ed does its best to follow the legislation.
Yeah,
And every time the legislation changes,
Yeah.
Ron has to go back and recalculate everything again.
you're right, and try to make it as accurate and functional, which may not always be easy.
Because he's also given the top statewide number, which he then gets distributed.
Right.
So if the legislation changes the top number, everything else is going to change with it.
So right now, what we have right here, we really don't have the revenues, but we understand that 142,000 difference in state aid. We also realize that in this number, on the expense side, we do not have the increases for salaries that will be approved or not approved by the voters. But this does not reflect any increases for anybody.
Those who are at status quo are those in the collective bargaining units.
But non-union, are there any increases for them in here? Okay.
Yes, there are. It ranges, and it's just a working number, ranges from 1% to 2%, but it's in the budget. And those are basically people who are, like I say, not represented by either bargaining group.
So the two bargaining groups that we have are both being negotiated this year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is
frankly, some of,
teachers and support staff.
yeah. Frankly, they're between 1% and 2.5%, but those are subject to change. I think and part of that will be reflected. I mean, part of that will be some reflection of what ultimately comes through negotiations, probably, and what the voters do
So,
with that.
my question is, to the committee as well. We have to hear both the town and the school side, and we look to both sides to kind of be flexible, because one year might be up a little bit and the other, so everyone has to be a little bit flexible. But we don't have the whole picture here, and we don't have any warrant articles yet from the school.
Right,
Nor
it's
do we
early.
have it from the town side.
Right, it's early.
It's early. But before this committee really can, try to figure it all out, we need to hear the whole issue. So how are we going to do this? Are we going to schedule another meeting later in December or January? Just so we can see the whole picture?
Well, I think we have to, don't you? I mean,
Yeah, I think we
get the
do.
material that you the
Yes.
warrant articles and things. I mean,
Yes.
it's just too early now. We're
It
just
is, and
trying to
that's-
get a head start on it this year, to get a feeling about what's going on, and I think they've done a good job with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
No criticism, because I
No,
know.
no, I know, and I didn't take it as such,
Yeah,
no.
I just,
No, I know
just trying to
that.
plan ahead to see how we can get together and try to figure, see the
Yeah.
whole picture.
Well, we should meet before January 10th because that's the budget hearing.
All right, that sounds good.
There you go.
But basically, and once you and Steve have a sense of how the numbers are coming together, then we
Yeah.
can.
Well, we don't change the dates, so to speak.
Yeah, I bespoke the January, the budget hearing, of course.
January 10th.
February, the vote in March.
And the deliberative session is when?
February 9th.
February 7th is ours.
So 110, 27, and 314, or whatever.
15, you're voting? 313.
13.
So sometime early January, first week of January, obviously, we can schedule a meeting.
As soon as we have some good information.
Well, you should by, you know.
Yeah, but if sooner, Jim, like if you,
He's saying if we get it sooner.
if you feel the
Yeah.
numbers are coming together, then.
Yeah, if we get it
Yeah.
sooner than later, we definitely want to meet sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
That's fair enough.
Okay. That's just my question.
Steve, obviously, you must feel significantly different about this the second time through.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, it's hopefully wiser and,
Well.
you know, it's a learning process.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
you know,
Because as much as you've done over the years, obviously, every place is a little bit different.
yeah.
And,
Well, the New Hampshire process is different than I was used to. Of course, I came from, the schools that came from South America were different, whole different entity altogether.
yeah.
Didn't have to worry about state funding there. Those were 100% financed by the parents through tuition. So, but yeah, you know, New Hampshire has an interesting mix where it's mostly local. And that's good and bad, by the way. It has some good things to it because the closer you are to where the money's being spent, the more accountable you are, right? In theory. But you do run into some issues with equity and wealth per pupil and some of those things that are problematic as well. And I think that's what in that funding form, political form, that's part of the big debate going forward, continue going forward is does the state need to find ways to distribute more money to relieve some of the local property tax burden? You know, all things being fair, the state doesn't get money out of thin air. It will still have to take it from the residents through other means. So, you know, there's no free lunch here. So, but, you know, that's the debate, is the shifting of taxes and where do you go? And of course, as well as managing expenses. I hope going forward, I think schools are like everybody. I think one of the things that schools are really struggling with is, as is anybody else who has employees with health insurance benefits, is that piece right there. And I really feel sorry. I mean, the businesses, that's a huge threat to the health of businesses as well because of the high cost of health insurance.
And in the years, obviously, you've done this, and reflecting on it, I mean, the challenges today as opposed to what they were when you first came in, or how you viewed them, or?
I think they're worse today, really do. Because they change, seems like they change every year, you know, they change the testing stuff we just had the Smarter Balance for like 2 years, now they're changing that assessment again. You don't even have time to think about it.
Not that it was ever easy, you know,
No,
per se,
no,
but,
I know.
but it, sometimes you look back on some things that you thought were tough at the time and say, geez, I wish I had that
Pretty
challenge.
simple.
I wish I had that challenge today.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the challenges you have is just keeping the buildings alive and going.
That is our worst challenge.
You know, and especially on how old is Lakeway now?
No, 67.
Depends on what parts you're talking about.
Yeah,
It's like
that's
Johnny,
true. I
it's like
forgot
Johnny
about that.
Cash's
It was built in 50.
Yeah.
1950.
Cadillac that he put together out of a number of years, if you remember that song. Most of you are too young to remember that
Oh,
song.
yeah, I remember that, yeah. Johnny
That's
Cash,
Lakeway.
yeah.
I listen to him all the time.
But anyways, you know, just because of that and trying to keep it warm, keep all, everything going in that building, and that's difficult, especially since we don't have building aid.
I'm glad you brought that up. That is,
Yeah.
that's the truth. That's tough. Keeps you up at night.
It is, it's hard, and it makes the community, not that you would ever not take care of your building, but if there is a point where you have to trade it in or you don't trade it in, and we've been to the trade-in part for
Yeah.
years now, and you just keep going and keep going, and so I don't know what is happening on state level of considering building aid, if it's even percolating in their discussions. Or if you, through the school board association, or through the superintendent's association, or through the North Country, how
All the
you are all
above.
addressing.
Trying to be a
this issue.
watchdog. and,
Yeah.
You know,
I
just
think
really
I think the governor mentioned it on several occasions. So let's hope that that's able to follow through. I think, again, there's some progress. I mean, we need to acknowledge that the kindergarten funding of that is a good step forward. And, yeah, and as far as the locals, I think that again, I think this board and people recognize that local, this community is very supportive of education. We can't do everything we want to do, but that's life, right? None of us can. And I think it's important to acknowledge that Lakeway will have its day, and we'll have to figure that out. But this community is, consistently supported education. I think that's important to
There's
know.
a total supportive community of everything. They're
Yep.
dynamite, they really
Yep.
are.
We just need to be careful and wise.
So are we almost done here? So when you get more information, you'll give us a call?
If you have any questions about the documents we had tonight, my door's always open. Please, come see me. You don't need an appointment. I'm there.
Questions
around.
for the building head, the principal, whatever? I mean, obviously, you guys gave a real good presentation last week. It was really nice to hear the up close and personal. No, I'm saying that's with sincerity.
They did great.
Yeah, and I guess, not that I expect the answer tonight, but something that I probably would like to hear at some point in time, if there was one thing that you could do or be able to change or add or whatever in each one of your buildings, you know, what would that one thing be that you think would make things that much better?
Crystal?
My building.
Well, yeah, the whole building.
The whole building.
No matter which year it was built.
I mean, you never know how much snow we're gonna get or how much it's gonna rain. You never know so the building itself makes me very
She might
nervous.
take us both out for this.
And probably a school social worker.
Yeah.
We have a great need to help kids, not just at school, but with their families and their home situations. And we do not have the resources in-house to support them. So that's one position that I think probably district-wide we are in desperate need of.
I mean, that's something that I think that, maybe I missed it the previous years, but it was mentioned last year, both here, and it was mentioned by White Mountain Mental Health at their presentation to the town, on the town side, was the percentage of people in their lifetime that will need some type of social services. And I think I kind of half joked last time, but when they first said it at the town budget, I thought it said 16%, but it was 60%, which mirrored your number. And that, getting back, I think, to what we started talking about a little bit earlier, I mean, as far as what the needs are, what has changed, I mean, in terms of that student, their stability, family dynamics, their health situation, how well they've been fed. I mean, all those items when they walk through the door in the morning. I know Mr. Smith, as with Mike Kelly at Profile, and I'm sure many others around the state, but I mean, you guys prided yourself basically on looking in the eyes of everybody who came through that door first thing in the morning. And I think both of you, could tell a lot from that, and I commend you obviously for doing that, because I mean, what that kid's, state of mind is when they come in the building in the morning is going to have a huge impact on what the productivity of that day will be, not just for them, but everybody else that they affect.
And at the high school, we have the after-school Learn program. We've talked about that a lot. We're working on considering ways to embed that in the day, where you've got more administrative support for those less traditional learners that impact the learning of others. Same thing, same needs, different population, different.
So I guess my thing too is, we've had a report from all of the building administrators, but Melanie, you're the curriculum coordinator, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we had it from Dale as well, and that's, that's both building and tech. But tell us a little bit about your position and how you try to do K-12.
Just check to see if there's enough time to do it all.
So let's see, my week is super busy. I'm back and forth between the schools sometimes 3 times a day. So like for instance, today my day started out up here and meeting with a group of teachers. I went down to the elementary school, back up here for a meeting, back down to meet with some teachers there. I've been more familiar with the elementary school, having been a teacher there. So I'm just kind of, getting my legs underneath me up here at the high school, meeting everyone, learning all the different personalities. And most of the meetings that I have with the teachers up here are with cross-content area teachers. So Jen and I have spent some time determining some focuses that will benefit all the teachers in those meetings. And, as an extension, help the students as well. And then some of my time this year has been spent, actually a good deal of my time has been spent with meeting with administration, meeting with teachers, meeting with the consultant that we hired to begin this process to transfer, as we transfer to a competency-based education system. So
Ann and I have been on the school board for so long. She's still on the school board, but at one time we did have a curriculum coordinator, remember? And yes, and what I found was that at one time, we don't have it like that way now, but at one time we had 3 different schools, basically, and no one had time to go back and forth. And so math programs, reading programs, all of those programs were decided at each individual school, and so you didn't have a continuity through, K through 12 in any of the programs. And so I'm happy that we do have someone on board to do that, because that not only is the new block scheduling important, that's equally important to have that discussion go K through 12.
Right, and being able to meet with all the teachers and administrators at both schools, I can hear about the strengths and the challenges that we are having pre-K to 12. Because actually I've met a few times with the preschool teachers as well, and started some dialogue between the pre-K teachers and the kindergarten teachers, as well as some observations there. So getting that going. So.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Any questions?
And in that process, other than just obviously accomplishing it, but I sense there's an evolving element to that also. I mean, that even once you get it all figured out, then
I don't know that that'll ever happen.
well, okay, but then things do change, because
Right.
I mean, the other thing we've talked about, that you've told us about over the last few years in terms of, what, I mean, you obviously have so much time during the day, and what time you dedicate to what items. I mean, we don't spend much time on penmanship anymore, right?
No.
We don't probably spend any time on penmanship, because,
A little bit.
well, you do, okay, well, it's probably good, but you know what I'm saying, when I was in school, probably spent an hour a day on it, or whatever. Hard to believe you looked at my penmanship today. But anyway, but that's an evolving thing though, in terms of what, once you get it figured out, but then every year probably there's somewhat of a shift in terms of adding emphasis to certain new items, de-emphasizing others, reallocating time, moving different items up and down the chain, maybe stuff that we used to do in 7th grade, maybe now we're doing in 6th grade or 5th grade, or I tend to probably tends to move younger and not older, right? And that's
For sure.
that's right. Smarter than a 5th grader or whatever it is with TV shows.
Well, that leaves all of us out.
But I mean, I think that's something we've heard a lot about, and obviously that's something for those of us that were obviously in school such a long time ago and haven't had the direct contact with, it's a little hard to get our minds around. But your comments about the social worker issue or whatever, I mean, that certainly hits home, and you can certainly see that in so many
Probably
areas.
one of the biggest impacts in the school day is the things that we can't control for the kids, and the things that we have a really hard time supporting because there are issues from home or food or poverty level or parents or grandparents even.
Although they're generally an asset.
Sometimes.
Yeah, well, hopefully more often than not, but I'm sure there's some exceptions.
Yeah, a lot of them are raising the
Yeah.
kids the right way too, so.
Yeah.
It's a
There's a lot of
different family
challenges.
dynamic.
A lot of challenges.
Well, any questions, anybody? So if you do have any questions on the information that you received tonight, please forward them to me, and I will forward them to Ann and to Steve. So if you have any questions for me? Thank you.
We thank you very much, and thank you very much.